Hey everybody, GravyTrain here, another episode of GravyTraining. So today, I've been trying to find the best way to illustrate this, because it's complicated as heck, and I want to get it as close to correct as we can, but it's going to be really hard to put concrete numbers down. So I'm just going to show you in general how the damage calculation works and talk through it, and hopefully by the end of it you'll have a better understanding, because a lot of this stuff functions differently than you might expect, differently than people have told you, and I wasn't even absolutely certain on all of this. So I spent some time going back and forth with private messages and talking with Dylan from the dev team, and he set me straight on how a lot of this stuff works. So this is confirmed by a developer. Now, our developer's human, yes, so some of this might not be absolutely right. I may have taken notes slightly wrong, but in general, this should be fairly representative of what the damage calculation looks like. So, and you'll note immediately, this is more complicated than this illustration. This is for illustration purposes only. So before anybody freaks out and says, oh, but it doesn't work quite like that, blah, yeah, I know. It's complicated as heck. There's a lot of factors, and it's too much to go into fully. So, first things first, we're going to look at the overall damage calculation. And effectively, your stars, I have the stars set up over here, and the stars will influence everything to some degree. But those multipliers that go into the stats also affect the damage and things like that too. So the base damage is going to be the number that the tooltip in game, or when you go and look at the ability and it says a certain amount of damage, that's the base damage. So that's fairly straightforward. The stars are already factored into that, so you don't have to kind of look at the stars separately. Then that is multiplied by the attack divided by the defense. So let's think about that for a moment. So if the attack is bigger than the defense, let's use some nice even numbers, and let's say that their attack is 10,000 and their defense is 5,000. So that's going to make this number a 2. If their defense was 10,000 and their attack was 5,000, that's going to make this a 1/2. So whatever this ratio is, it's going to scale the damage up or down, and it is dependent on both factors. So the attack is from the attacking player, the defense is from the defending player, and this is a contested kind of stat. So by having as high of an attack as possible or as high in a defense as possible, you're going to change the equation here. Then that is multiplied by all of the modifiers. And these modifiers come in a lot of different flavors. This box especially is very, very kind of fuzzy. So there may be specific ways these things are kind of applied, or a specific order and all that. They wouldn't give me an exact formula, but they pointed me to some specific resources. We talked through the general formula, and this is pretty much agreed on. What you end up getting is a mix of your elemental bonuses or debuffs. You get for the affinity and blessing of the seeker. You get any crit multiplier that would be added in there. You get the effect of buffs. You get the effect of debuffs. and that's all of those buffs will be, the buffs will add or subtract depending on however they're listed. Some of them will be additive, some will be subtract or multiplicative, that kind of thing. And then all of that is factored against the damage resistance. And the best way that I can sort of explain what this ends up being is this ends up being a positive or a negative factor that gets weighed against the overall multiplier and the damage itself. So this probably technically happens separate, but I'm kind of grouping it together. So this ends up becoming a factor that is either going to be subtracting from the damage, or it's going to be adding to the damage. And then all of that in turn applies to the health. The resulting number here gets applied as damage to your character. So let's take a look at the damage reduction, because this does not function like people have been thinking that it did. So what you've got is you have two different kinds of damage reduction and damage penetration. So you've got static damage reduction and static damage penetration, and you've got conditional damage reduction and conditional damage penetration. And what that means is you will have on your runes, you will have either, like if you look at, say, an Aegis rune, which everybody's been told, oh, it's not a good rune, blah, blah, blah. Well, it actually can be. So the damage reduction for static is all of the stats 1 through 3 on your runes. So you might have 5% damage reduction, and then a 7% damage reduction, or a 13% damage reduction, or something like that on one rune, and then you have another rune that gives you like 6 and 8, and then another rune that gives you 4 and 5 damage reduction. All of those that are on your first 3 stats, or the first 3 stat slots, and we can actually, I'm going to pull up an example over here. If we look, let me find a damage reduction rune, and then I will pull that out. We'll switch to this, and turn that back on for now. So I think I have some on, oops, I'm clicking on the OBS and not on the game, because I'm smart. Okay, so I should have an Aegis rune in here somewhere. Okay, maybe not. I know I should have one maybe in a yellow. Somewhere. Anywhere. Anywhere. Bueller. Well, okay, so here's, well, yeah, that one's kind of no bueno. Blue? Aegis? I have one. Did I actually put it on somebody? That'd be my luck, is that I would have put it on somebody. Alright, well, let's craft one. Let's craft an Aegis. Green one. And we'll just make it improved, because it's what I got. Alright. Tune it, whatever. That's not going to help very much, but we'll just max it out. And okay, so this actually works out pretty well. So what you can see is in this, we've got, and let me accept this one. Back to my runes, find the improved, and let's upgrade it. I love just throwing money away. And this is what we have. So what you have in the top 3 stats is you have static damage reduction. And down here in the fourth stat, you have conditional damage reduction. So this works out well. So if there were several lines of damage reduction, so if instead of health here, this had damage reduction, they are additive, meaning they're just flat out added together. All of these yellow, or these first three stats across your entire rune for your hero are added together. They are not multiplicative. They are added together. Okay? So those things are added, and then across all of your stats, all of your damage reduction is handled this way. All of your damage penetration is handled this way. So that makes up your static damage reduction. And then the conditional damage reduction is checked against the conditions, and if it matches the conditions, it applies. So if I'm not being attacked by a dark hero, this conditional damage reduction doesn't apply. Also, every single source of conditional damage reduction, and also anything from buffs or anything else, damage reduction or damage penetration, is all conditional. Everything outside of those white stats is conditional. Every single part of that is multiplicative. So basically it ends up being, long story short, it's diminishing returns. So say you had 1,000 points of damage coming in, or the amount of damage doesn't even matter. You have 100% of the damage coming in. Then you have 25% damage reduction is your base amount. That's your static damage reduction. So you remove that 25% of the damage, just never gets taken. And then, or is just, it's dealt with. Then you've got 75% left. So now your next rune is 10% in PvP. So that means of that 75%, you're going to remove 7.5% of that. And then, so you'll have a total of 32.5. And then you may have another one, another 10% rune. Once again, you'll pull off then, so then 7.5 off of 75 is going to make it 67.5. So you'll pull 6.75 off of that. And so on. The math gets silly. But notice that the amount for the same effect each time, the effect gets smaller and smaller and smaller, because you're taking it as if you had the entire thing, you've pulled some stuff out of it. Imagine it's Play-Doh. You pinch off some Play-Doh, you set that aside, you roll the Play-Doh back into a ball, then you pinch off that same percentage, and you glom that onto the first one, then you roll it back into a ball. The ball keeps getting smaller, so the percentage that you're pulling off keeps getting smaller. So 10% of this amount, it's still 10%, but it's 10% of a smaller amount, and so on. All of that gets applied for your damage reduction. Then coming back to here, so that's all the static and conditional damage reduction. The exact same thing happens with damage penetration. So all the static damage penetration is calculated. Then all of the conditional damage penetration is counted. And once again, that can come from buffs, that can come from runes, it can come from anything like that. And then you end up with a total that is then compared. Damage penetration is compared against damage reduction. And if everything meets up evenly, you end up with the exact same amount on both sides, then it's 0, and nothing is done to the damage. However, if it is, like, say, in favor of the damage reduction, then that resulting amount, just the difference, is applied against the damage. So, say we had 60% effective total damage reduction, and we had 50% effective damage penetration. That means that the difference between those is 10%. So we're going to reduce 10% of this incoming damage. So this would be like a 0.9, because we're going to be taking 90% of the damage, not 100% of the damage. If, on the other hand, this side, the damage penetration was 60, and the damage resistance was 50, it will indeed penetrate. So damage penetration is not just limited to countering damage resistance. You will do 10% more damage. So that, I mean, it's complicated in how it gets calculated. You don't have to know all that math. All you need to know is that you don't want to stack a bunch of fourth stat damage reduction and damage reduction buffs. Same with damage penetration. So for example, an epic, Jin's epic gives 25% damage reduction, 50% to honor-bound heroes. So you're not going to want to stack a bunch of fourth stat damage reduction, because that's going to just get smaller and smaller and smaller really quickly. But if you only have one or two sources of damage reduction in that conditional stuff, you're going to get more bang for your buck. Remember, the static damage reduction will actually show up in your character sheet. So when you actually look at a hero, and come back over here and go and look at a hero, and you go down, and this guy has no damage reduction, but if you look at a hero, I think my Zom might have some damage reduction. That's probably where I just put it, yeah. So this total, you can see, so he's got 13% and 6%. If we come back over here, this one, I'm using Zom in the tower, that's why I have the cargo rune. Okay, so it's this here. So I've got 12.77% and 6.37%. This total, when you come over here to the stats, is the 19%. So this part is all added together. This is accurate. What you see on the screen here for the tooltip, surprise, surprise, is accurate. So it's the sum of all of the, so this is a case where we've got two of these. So 12.77 plus 6.37 is what, 19.14. So yeah, we're going to be 19% with a little bit extra. That value is applied against the damage coming in, and so on. And then this is checked, this 8% damage reduction from Nature Heroes is checked as conditional damage reduction. So that's how all of that works. So if we come back over here, so that calculation back and forth is what gives you your DR value. Your DR value is effectively just another one of these modifiers, and then that damage comes out into health. So what does this mean when you're runing your heroes? So effectively, you want to maximize your attack versus your opponent's defense. You're going to want to maximize your defense against your opponent's attack, because that's going to be the biggest source of multiplying your damage. And getting that number to be greater than 1, so attack is higher when you're on the offense, is critical, because you take a hero like Jin, and you take where he has an ability and your Jin has got really high attack, like mine has almost 25,000 attack. So I go up against almost any hero, and I'm going to be doing big damage. Like if they don't have at least 25,000 damage, I'm already doing extra damage, or defense, I'm doing extra damage. If I get to where that's 2 or 3, like you only have 7,000 defense, I have more than 3 times your defense, that number is going to get big. So that is how it's the attack divided by the defense gives you, and effectively it's a constant number. If for that particular swing or that particular attack, that attack versus the defense is a constant number. That gets applied against the bonuses and applied against the base damage, and then that is the actual health that's actually done. So that is why And once again, I will straight up tell you guys that health on runes 99% of the time is useless. The reason is that this is a multiplier. Health is a flat amount. So if you add 1,000 health to a hero with stars and everything like that, you're going to get 2,000 health back. Okay, great. If you instead put defense, because health is a stat that is supposed to make your hero live longer, so we're going to compare it to defense. If you get that defense multiplier to where this ratio of attack to defense, it becomes fractional, like it becomes 1/2 or 1/4. Even the difference between 1/2 and 1/4 of 100,000 points of damage coming from like the base damage times all this other stuff, that's going to be a serious factor. And it wouldn't actually be 100,000, but you know what I mean. It's going to become 100,000 after. And then the thing is, this gets amplified through these things. So the attack divided by the offense, if it was 3/4, then you're going to take all these modifiers. It's going to be 3/4 of the base damage times all these modifiers. As if you go, so that's 75%. If it was 4 out of, or we'll say 3 out of 5, 3/5. That attack, that defense, by switching just between 3/4 to 3/5, which is only going to be a difference potentially of like maybe 1,000 defense, something like that. By going from 3/4 to 3/5, you're now going from 75% of that damage coming in to 60% of the damage coming in. That's 15% drop, and that's a multiplier against all the damage. So for a big damage hero, with a lot of damage coming in, that 15% could be 15,000 points of damage difference. So that health that you're adding gives you minimal bonus. If you're better off putting damage resistance on your hero than you are adding health, it'll have a much greater net effect than adding health will. Your base health that you get with your hero is almost always plenty if you protect yourself. That's like saying that if you get fatter, you're better off if you get shot, because you have more body mass that can be absorb the shot. No, you want a bulletproof vest, and you want something to hide behind for armor and everything else. Like, health is not important. I mean, obviously, 1 hit point of that health is important, but health is not important. Not to the degree that all these other factors are. So, to recap, static damage or static DR and DP is added together. Conditional DR and DP is multiplied together. The static DR is applied first, and then the multiplicative. That gives you a balance one way or the other, which gets applied to everything else here, which determines the damage actually coming through. So the points that you want to control is going to be things like your elemental bonuses, whether or not you're critting, buffs, debuffs, damage reduction, all of those things. These are things that one side or the other has control over. That attack versus that defense, damage resistance / penetration balance, and then finally everything gets applied to health. So I know there was a lot of math talk and a lot of crazy concepts. Feel free to ask questions in the comments, or better yet, come to my Discord. It is, and I need to, if I'm gesturing here, you actually have to have the camera open to be able to see it. Come to the Discord. It's in the links below. You can join our community and ask questions, ask for advice. You can suggest videos. I mean, just hang out and talk about stuff. Participate in the community. We have a growing, really a helpful community. Yeah. I would really appreciate a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell so you get notified. And yeah, that's it. Once again, though, the numbers here, this is all approximations. It's simplified a bit for illustration purposes. So in general, however, it is accurate and confirmed with a dev. So that's it. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a great day.